over in the EU, which is the, European community governed by a committee. So ridiculous. The idea and the notion that Germany, Italy, France, and Spain can all get along and discuss things rationally and come to a rational decision is totally ridiculous. Such different and disparate. I mean, it was the EU was supposed to be, when it was originally formed, was supposed to be an economic bloc. It was supposed to be an alliance, trade alliance, where they could trade as a, unified bloc, which kind of made sense. And it's now become the Third Reich, or I should say the Fourth Reich, telling everybody what to do. You know what they declared today? Greta Thunberg is probably outraged. The committee of the EU, the committee of their parliament, has decided that nuclear energy and gas, natural gas, is okay. It's green. But oil and other non-nuclear forms of energy, that's not green. Is that the most hypocritical thing? And you know why they did it. Because they're forced now to build nuclear power plants again. And they're forced to buy natural gas in order to fuel their burgeoning energy costs, because they're sticking cars and plugging in outlets just like we are. Just doing dumb things like that. They told us there's going to be rolling blackouts here in the United States, so we probably can't meet the energy needs, and we've only got 3% of our cars that are electrified. What happens when it gets to like 15% or 20%? Over in the EU, their solution is, we'll just build nuclear power plants. Well, what? I remember back in the 70s when we stopped building nuclear power plants. Oh, that's not green. We have to store the energy, and we have to build silos into granite mountains and store the stuff. Don't these morons get it? It's a direct relationship to energy to pollution. There's no way around it. You know how there's an equation, E equals MC squared? It's E equals MC squared equals P cubed, pollution cubed. That's how it works. The more energy you produce, the more pollution you create. Now, the pollution can come in different forms. Like with radioactive energy, you get solid waste, radioactive solid. We can't do anything with it, although there's some people trying to do stuff with it. And it generates a lot of it, and you got to put it in silos, and it lasts for hundreds of years. Because why? Because the energy generated by a nuclear power plant is enormous, assuming it's running at full tilt. Natural gas is energy itself. It's evaporated fossil fuels, so it doesn't generate much pollution. It generates it in the form of heat and carbon emissions, but it's so low, it's almost right, because what you get from natural gas, the energy you generate, is from directly burning the fuel itself, and so it's not that much energy relative to the amount of fuel you have to have. Oil has more energy per cubic foot, and so forth. And people say to me, well, what about solar? Solar doesn't generate. Yeah, but the panels themselves are extremely toxic and use all kinds of carbon emissions to create them. That's where your pollution is, in the form of liquid and solid waste, and in the making of the panels and whatnot. Not to mention I mentioned this on social media, and people never neglect to really calculate the true cost of pollution of solar and wind. Solar and wind takes real estate, right? You have to put a solar panel on top of something. And usually that is on a solar farm. What they have to put on a solar farm? You can't let grass grow underneath the solar farm, because the grass has to be mowed, right? So what do? You put it on gravel, and you put it on concrete, and you put it on roofs, and you put it on parking structures. Well, don't you understand that when you have to pave something over in order to provide energy, you're creating a heat island? Just like when you put a solar panel on a roof of a building, you're creating heat, because normally the building itself will absorb it, but now that heat is reflected back up into the atmosphere because there's light that comes off those solar panels, and it affects the albedo, which is the light reflective force on the planet itself. Ask any astronomer. And that generates energy into the atmosphere, so that creates global warming in and of itself. Well, it's not a lot. But you understand, combined with the pollution of the actual farm itself, creating the panels and then the disposal of panels and the replacement of it and the shipment of them all over the world, it always comes out the same. If you are able to calculate every variable, every time you create energy, you create pollution. It is unavoidable. The earth is a closed system. It's a greenhouse. And so if you take water out of it, the water comes back in the form of evaporated moisture. If you take energy out of it, it comes back in the form of reflected in pollution, and so forth. There is no quote-unquote way of green energy. It's a falsehood. It does not exist. Now, whether global warming is caused by carbon emissions, that's a completely different argument, right? There's all kinds of indications that it is, all kinds of indications that it isn't. The question is, how do we deal with it? So the EU is going to deal with it, wow, by just changing their mind. That's how they're going to deal with it. Okay, we'll have to use, natural gas is okay. Natural gas, we've done additional studies. You know, every time the experts are lying to you, they start with studies show. So studies show nuclear energy and gas, natural gas, is greener than we thought, and thereby qualifies as green energy. Yeah, because they need it now. That's the reason. They need it. Russia's cutting off their gas. Russia's cutting off their oil. They got to ship it. You can't really ship oil from Saudi Arabia all the way to the United States and back. They're shipping natural gas over to Europe to help them through because Putin is turning up the screws, and they are using more energy now than they ever have. You can't keep up with it with solar farms and wind farms. I mean, there's reasons why you do it. There's reasons why you have solar energy. It works great on my lawn. When I'm putting in lawn lights, I don't want to run wires all over my property anymore. It's great for that. But by and large, it'll never replace pure good old oil and gas, fossil fuels, or nuclear energy. Nuclear energy, really, when you analyze it, actually is a really good energy source because of the size of the footprint and the length of the pollution, how long it takes to generate the pollution and how long you store it. And there are methods of storing that last forever, but you understand, you're not avoiding it. You're not avoiding pollution by building a nuclear power plant. You're just changing it into something else. Solid fuel. It's really what it is. And then, of course, the construction. Shipment of materials all over. Maybe they figured out a way that they can profit off the graphs of the building of the thing. I don't know. Hopefully they won't build another Chernobyl. I understand those Russian reactors are still, hot. They still use that old-fashioned hot design, where if you go to shut it off, it has the potential for blowing up. American reactors, which are based on a French design, don't work that way. When they fail, it goes into default, and the nuclear rods don't go into the unit itself. The fuel is removed. It's actually a much safer design. It won't explode, or shouldn't, in theory. Natural gas would work well. We have tons of natural gas. You think America does a lot of oil. Natural gas, shoot, it's everywhere. And meanwhile, in California, they're banning natural gas stoves because they say that contributes to fossil fuel emissions. And my little stove in my kitchen where I cook my eggs in the morning is dangerous somehow. I once talked to a guy who worked for the gas company. And he was installing it. The pipe was already there. They were installing the stove, and the guys that they sent out to install the stove didn't know what they were doing and installed it leaky, so I had to have the gas company out to repair it. Another incident where people that you hire don't know what they're doing. Right? And he says to me, statistically, that there are more fires and more deaths from exploding electric stoves for the natural danger of electric than there are gas. Actually, gas stoves are one of the safest things you can have in your house. Just a 2 cents. We got to move on. It's another banner day for the Biden administration. I mean, they just keep stepping on their own dick, these guys. It's nonstop. And then we've got some information on the Highland Park case about the dad, and I feel free to report this now. Some of the stuff are now verified. We got to talk about Chicago itself, how violent a city is and why. And then we'll get into the Biden administration story with Harris and bribery of local officials by Chinese authorities and Chinese money. And then they removed something from the White House, which didn't shock me. Let's take a break and get into all of it today. We'll be right back.